Good evening, everyone. I am going to reconvene the June, what is today, 6th? Third, goodness, June 3rd Board of Supervisors meeting. We did have a closed session meeting, so we need to certify that.
Yes, do each of you certify that to the best of your knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered by the Board of Supervisors in the closed meeting.
Ms. Comer?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Carney?
Yes.
Mr. Whitson?
Yes.
And yes for me as well.
You.
All right, first public hearing, Ms. Smith, you want to convene?
At this point, I will call the Planning Commission to order. I believe, is Mr. Schulin here? I don't see Mr. Schulin in attendance, but when I spoke to him earlier, he indicated he would be here. So maybe he will join us yet. Do we have Mr. Light joining us
You do?
virtually?
Yes.
All right, and with that, I think everyone else is accounted for. So I'll call the Planning Commission to order. Do we need to adopt the agenda?
I don't think that's necessary.
Okay, great.
All right.
As both bodies have discussed prior to this meeting, staff came to you and advised the bodies that the Rappahannock County Code appeared to be lacking as related to contractors' yards. The code currently includes two different types of this business: a small contracting business on the same lot as a residence, and it allows a relatively limited contractor yard use and has several special standards included in Article 6 of the code in Section 170.62D that constrain the number of vehicles and a number of other facets of those types of that type of use. Contractor's office shop yard, a different use, it allows basically anything larger than what is allowed in a small contracting business. Surprisingly, this larger, more intense use does not have any special standards in Article 6. There are none at all. And so staff reviewing that suggested that perhaps there should be special standards for a contractor's office shop yard. And in earlier meetings and discussing this with the board and then with the Planning Commission, there was a thought that perhaps there should be two different intensity levels of contractors' office shop yards. And so staff suggested special requirements for a level 1 type facility and a level 2 type facility. These are devised, the definition is very general, but the constraints for a level 1 and a level 2 layer on top and have a more intense use than a small contracting business on the same lot as your residence. And so that information is included in the proposed ordinance amendment, which is attached, and it identifies several factors to constrain these two types of use. For example, contractor's office shop yard, intensity level 1, minimum lot size of 10 acres. Today, there are no minimum lot sizes. It can be anything. No part of the parcel can be bounded by or in view of any primary highway. We've found historically that our primary highways are scenic byways and very important to that critical vision that's set forth in our comprehensive plan. So, and then in addition, road frontage needs to be at least 200 feet on a state-maintained road, and that would provide for control so that appropriate entrance with appropriate control over the view shed on either side could be provided. The owner would have control to cut trees or whatever they need to do to provide the right site distances for entrances. Materials, goods, service, supplies, parts, vehicles, pieces of equipment stored or found on the site must be limited to things that are customarily used in the contractor's ordinary course of business. This is subjective, but there's no way to understand the full range of full type of contractors' yards that are out there. Many different types. It could be an HVAC company. It could be a heavy construction site work company. And so the type of equipment that they have needs to be consistent with what they do. So if you dig ponds and ditches, you should have equipment that is used for dig pond and ditches and not a bunch of other stuff piled up. All material, goods, parts, supplies stored or found on the site must be fit for their intended use. This is not a site where old equipment goes to die. The equipment there must be in working use for its intended purpose. No junk or inoperable vehicles or inoperable equipment may be stored on the site. And so the inoperable vehicles otherwise defined in this document, or in the zoning ordinance. No more than a combination of 50 vehicles and pieces of equipment. These may be 50 vehicles, it may be one vehicle and 49 pieces of equipment, with that equipment defined for the purpose of this section as those things that are motorized, self-propelled, or towed and used in the ordinary course of the contractor's business. So these 50 things have a nexus to what that contractor is doing. And it might be compactors or rollers or whatever. All parking, loading, open storage shall be effectively screened from view from neighboring properties. Several other sections of our ordinance include the similar wording and requirements for effective screening. That effective screening can be considered by the board as these special exceptions are being considered publicly. And conditions can frame out exactly what the board intends in each case based on the site-specific conditions to make this use more consistent with the underlying by right use. The total area covered by outdoor storage, so things laying around, in connection with the use shall not exceed 20,000 square feet. The board might pin that to a smaller number during a special exception for a particular parcel in a particular area in order to make it consistent with by right uses, but it can't ever be more than 20,000 square feet. The total area covered by all structures used in connection with the use shall not exceed 10,000 square feet. And the site shall not be open to the public. So this is your contractor's yard. It's not a place of business where you have customers coming to pick up goods, buy things, whatever. So that's level 1. So level 2 seeks to build on top of that and have for a higher intensity use. And so for a higher intensity use, the requirements are a little bit tougher. However, the potential impact to the community could also be higher. And so for this, a minimum lot size shall be 25 acres. No part of the parcel similar shall be in view of a primary highway. Road frontage is similar to the other use. However, level 2 applications, because of their intensity, shall include a traffic management plan including the number and types of vehicles normally using the site and describing the existing road geometry, including surface treatment, width, and horizontal and vertical curves along the traveled route between the site and the primary highway. It's not located on a primary highway, it's located on a secondary highway or secondary road. And so not all secondary roads would be appropriate for all types of contractors' businesses, but they might be appropriate for many depending on the secondary road. Our secondary roads are very different, whether you're talking about Richmond Road or Rolling Road, for example. Totally different roads, appropriate for different types of contractors' business. It's the applicant's responsibility to identify why their business is compatible with that road based on the type of equipment that they are going to use and have traveling that road. Proposed entrances shall be adequate to accommodate the vehicles normally using them. So that's VDOT is going to require that generally, but we want to spell it out clearly here, and that they have to be designed so you're not impeding the traveling public. We're not having to back up 3 or 4 times to get into a driveway or the entrance to this facility. We're able to enter and exit without impacting the community. And then the roads leading from the public road into the site need to be sufficient. Just because you have an adequate public road and adequate entrance doesn't mean that once the vehicles leave the public road, they're not somehow stacking because of bad geometry or road conditions within the site. And so they need to be able to make their way into the site appropriately without causing impacts to the public road behind them. Similarly, materials, goods, supplies, parts, vehicles, pieces of equipment stored or found on site must be limited to things that are customarily used. We've heard that before. Material, goods, supplies used or stored must be fit for their intended use, same as level 1. No junk or inoperable vehicles, same as level 1. Parking and loading, same as level 1. The total area covered by outdoor storage and connection may not exceed 20,000 square feet. So you get a little bit more, right? Or may exceed. So this is, level 1 was 20,000 square feet. You can exceed 20,000 square feet. There is no limit listed here. That's a function of the review of this particular applicant, like it is today with the general standards and the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission looking at their application and seeing what's appropriate. And the applicant would have to show why their area of disturbance is appropriate for that site. The total area covered by all structures and connection shall not exceed 20,000 square feet. So it was 10,000 and the other 20,000 here, so you get a bigger building. Level 2 applications must include light, noise, dust, vermin, fume, smoke, and odor mitigation plan, as well as plans for on-site fire suppression and on-site chemical spills emergency mitigation plan. So the applicant knows what their business is. They know the risks of their business. It's up to them to share with the board and the Planning Commission how they're going to mitigate those impacts so they don't affect the neighbors and the underlying use in the area. And then lastly, the site, like the others, shall not be open to the public or customers unless expressly led by the conditions of special exception. So it's not allowed unless the applicant convinces the Planning Commission and board that some level of public access is appropriate because of the very specific site-specific nature of that use. Important to this is that Mr. Goff, in drafting, felt that it was important that there was clear distinction between what is an automobile graveyard, junkyard, which is a state-defined thing, is also defined in our local ordinance, and what is a contractor's yard. And some of the wording in the contractor's yard seeks to speak to that by the equipment needing to be operable and appropriate, et cetera. But the word junk and junkyard is included in the contractor's yard sections. And so the thought was to clean up this definition as well. And it does reference the authority granted by Code of Virginia 332804 and 152903. I should say that our current code, as I've noted in the preamble here, already does reference that the state code and essentially states, and I'll pull it up, states that, well, this new version of where did we go? Now it went to another piece. Hold on 1 second. There we go. In addition to the regulations of this chapter, junkyards shall be subject to the provisions of 33.1.348 of the Code of Virginia, automobile graveyards. In 2014, 33.1.348 was recodified, and the name changed to junkyards, which is now 33.2, whatever it says in the other guy. 804, that's the same code section. Other parts of our code basically say that when the state changes their code, unless there's a clearly different meaning intended, the new code section conveys. And that'll be a cleanup item that should happen when we move further into the Berkeley Group project. So I know there's a very fast run through of this, but I wanted to make sure I hit the high points of what this is intending and not intending to do. Before the board can act on any zoning ordinance amendment, it must be advertised to the public in accordance with Code of Virginia section 15.2.2204. That has happened. The Planning Commission must also have a public hearing. And the Code of Virginia allows there to be a joint public hearing. Previous meeting, the board asked for this to be a joint public hearing, and it was advertised as a joint public hearing. You have a quorum, maybe all of the planning commissioners here tonight. And they did discuss this at their May 15th meeting. The board discussed this at the May 6th meeting. That information is provided in the narrative. Also note that the comprehensive plan does support this proposed ordinance amendment and broadly supports it. When you look at the goals, 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10, and the principles 1, 2, 3, 7, and 10. And I want to make it very clear that today there are absolutely no special requirements. All of this is adding additional requirements where there are none now. Special exceptions are still subject to review by the public and the board through the public hearing process and through conditions to further constrain uses. And that was the only thing the board had to put a box around a potential use in the past. This provides some assurance to the community that certain things must be met rather than having full reliance on what conditions might be applied. With that, given everything's been advertised appropriately, it would be appropriate to the Planning Commission and the board to open a public hearing jointly and allow you to hear from the public.
Well, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing on behalf of the Planning Commission.
And I'll open the public hearing for the board, and note that when you are recognized and come up, it's this particular item only that we're wanting to hear about right now. So the contractor yard is the public hearing at the moment. Anyone wishing to speak and be heard, please be recognized, and when you come up, give us your name and your district. And we'll keep it to a 3-minute conversation at this point.
I did want to note for the record too, Mr. Schulin joined us about 7:04.
Good to have you.
Not at all. We were missing you.
John Capielli. Obviously, you know that I'm going to comment about this. Obviously, you know that we're going to go to court. So we won't even go with those. The first thing, it seems that this is awful cobbled together. And the 25-acre restriction as a minimum versus 10 acres. I have 18. I can add my property next door and get over the top of it. If necessary, I'll buy the other neighbor out. Doesn't matter. But I think that you've had all this input from these people in the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors amongst yourselves, but the contractors are, as contractors, I don't see any input from any of them. The rules haven't been, or this proposal hasn't even been distributed. Mr. Curry was the only person that had access to it. You had to go to him instead of going to zoning. When Mr. Curry was asked, can I have a moment to discuss this and find out some detail behind it, I was told specifically, I will not discuss this. So I can't even get a discussion in advance of this. I can't have a discussion here because nobody's allowed to answer me. I can only speak one way. This seems a little railroadish. There's a number of people that I've been in contact with over the last few days who are really upset about this. And what we ask as a group is that at the very least, that this vote be put off for 30 days so that people can see this. In fact, what Mr. Curry has sent me by email a couple of days ago, right after I had surgery, is different than what was just read. There was no 25-acre restriction. So what was posted and then given as a handout by email as preparation for tonight's hearing does not match. And if you say that there was no restrictions before, I tell you what, this board spent over $100,000 enforcing what they felt was the restrictions already in place. I spent $50,000. Luckily, I've just been replenished. So we're going to go back to doing this again. I don't want to. I would much rather get along and just move along. I already have a permit from the building department for 2 acres worth of outside storage, which was designed, built, inspected, stamped, approved. Now you're telling me that all of that was for nothing because you're going to limit me? to something different? You can't answer that question. I can. It won't work. Why start a fight that's not needed to? There are 1,100 people in this county that are registered with the Secretary of State as being contractors in this county. There are only 2 special exception permits that have ever been granted in this county. Everybody's working. Everybody's doing what they need to do. But it has to be all undercover. It shouldn't ought to be that way. They want to be upfront and everything. You're telling me I can't be on the secondary road? I'm on 211. I got 2 lanes that I can pull out on. I was even told by somebody that said in this board, if there's any place appropriate to have a truck come out onto the highway, 211 is the road. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ron Macklow from Jackson District. First, very briefly, is that in this proposal, whatever, there are definitions, and it's talking about contractors' yards, but there's no definition for a contractor. And I think that needs to be in there because at times that can be applicable. But what I'm really concerned about, and I think I don't know if you've missed this or whatever, is that what you are proposing and what we've been doing is that on both the minimum 10 acres and 25 acres, they cannot, no part of the parcel may be bounded by or in view of any primary highway. Road frontage shall be 200 feet on a state maintained road with a paid minimum travel width that is adequate for the proposed use going from the site to the primary highway. So what you are proposing here is that these businesses be on secondary roads. And going to the next page here on no more than a combination of 50 vehicles and pieces of equipment shall be stored on the site. So what this says is that on a secondary road, I live on a secondary road, Battle Mountain Road, that someone can have a contractor site, they can have 50 vehicles at that site. That means 6 o'clock in the morning, there are perhaps 50 vehicles coming down Battle Mountain Road to get to the contractor's yard. Then the employees are getting in the vehicles, 50 vehicles, driving them back out Battle Mountain Road to the primary highway, 211. In the afternoon, 50 vehicles come back down Battle Mountain Road to the storage site, and the employees get in their vehicles and drive back out to 211. People come in here, I'm on the BZA, for a tourist home, where on the weekend there might be 2 or 3 vehicles that come down a secondary road, and that people are up in arms. This does not make any sense. This is encouraging heavy traffic every day on secondary roads. And I don't think, if you talk to the folks that live there, no, we don't want this. We've got to come up and put them on the primary highway, just like John said. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Karen Hunt, and I live in Jackson District. I'll keep it brief. While I've looked over the proposed sign ordinance amendment, I'm still reviewing it more in depth. I understand the background here, and while it makes sense in light of that experience to amend the current language regarding contractor yards, we are also amending the current ordinance language for automobile graveyards and junkyards. While it may make sense to do so, the Board of Supervisors has indicated the desire to move expediently, and this is on a fast track here with the joint meeting. I'm also wondering if there has been any research to see what similar ordinance language other counties may have that has worked well for them. We cannot be the only jurisdiction to deal with this sort of thing. I would point out we have a current definition of automobile graveyard that references 2 inoperable vehicles, but the proposed draft language now combines that with junkyard and junk together and increases the number to 5. I question how we arrived at the number 50 at line 86 that states, quote, no more than a combination of 50 vehicles and pieces of equipment shall be stored on site. And while the term equipment is mentioned in prior sections, line 87 further defines it to have a more specific meaning in that part. I'm not sure this is the proper way to identify and define what may be intended as an added limitation here. In lines 123 through 125, what does an acceptable, quote, light, noise, dust, vermin, smoke/fumes, and odors mitigation plan look like? Where are we clarifying that? How would staff assess whether such a plan was acceptable? I think this proposed draft ordinance could be further improved. And I feel it would be wise to make sure we are enacting a well thought out amended ordinance and aren't inadvertently enacting something in a reactionary way. It's important that we are thoughtful about this, and if we need to tweak it a bit to make it right, I think we should take the time to do that. I'd ask that you consider that this could benefit from some additional work here before it is ready for final consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Deke Deacons, Stonewall District. I'm glad I don't have a dog in this fight after 50 years, but I'm part of the contracting community in heart and soul. We're messy, we're loud, but we're the backbone of America. We build, we make it happen. Most of these areas that you're talking about have already been in existence long before most people in this room came here. The ordinance about being fit for its intended purpose. Myself, I drive obsolete vehicles, had obsolete equipment. Can't buy it on the internet. You have to have a junk part. You have to have a parts vehicle to even do that. That's all part of a contractor's yard. And I think the current tone of delaying this to a future meeting, I think would be certainly acceptable. I would not rush to judgment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deke.
All right, I don't see anybody else in the courtroom. Is there anyone on Zoom wishing to speak with regards to this public hearing? Please raise your Zoom hand. I think we've just got, I don't expect a hand to be raised, so I am going to go ahead and close the public hearing, this public hearing, and open it up to both the Planning Commission and the board.
I would just turn to the commissioners at this time to see if you all had any comments or additions to what's before us this evening. That would be wonderful for the record, if you don't mind, please, Steph.
And it'll help your members who are not here and participating remotely be able to hear you better.
Okay, I'm Steph Ritter. I'm on the Planning Commission and I'm from the Wakefield District. I agree with Karen. I think we need to slow this process down in looking at the contractors. I mean, there's so many things that are amiss. For instance, lack of definition of contractor, what's level 2, what's level 1 in definitions. The whole issue of, do we want, as Ron pointed out, 50 or more vehicles coming and going on secondary roads? Why is there no limit on the level 2 for number of vehicles? Why are we only protecting neighbors from the view of the junk yards or the contractors' yards? Why aren't we proposing that there be some kind of barrier to the road so the traveling public doesn't have to look at all the either the trucks or the junk. The, some of the definitions, I think, are really vague. For instance, all material goods, parts, or supplies stored or found on site must be fit for their intended use. The intended use may not be the use that's required by the contractor. You may have a tractor that's in fine working order for farming that's also stored there, but not necessarily related to whatever the contractor's doing. So, I mean, there are a number of things that I just think we really need to take a moment and look. And then look at what we're doing here and why. And then the other thing, I don't know why these are permitted on conservation, in conservation districts. That just seems to me a really terrible mistake. So there's so many issues that I think we just need to slow down, look at, listen to what the contractors have to say. I mean, I have no idea what their needs are. And we haven't heard from them on the planning commission, so let's give them a chance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steph.
Tommy Atkins, Jackson District. I agree. I think we need to put more thought into this. I think we need to go back to the state code and comply with a lot of that in what we're wanting to do. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel here. All right. It does say in the state code that they can a primary highway within 1,000 feet. But then it needs to be screened, not only from the highway, but from all the surrounding neighbors, that you cannot see any of the items on this contractor's yard by the visible eye. So that's some important things that we need to take into consideration. So again, I think we've made a start, but I think we need to slow it down. We need to get more input, and I truly believe we need to rely on this state code a whole lot more.
I do want to clarify, that state code is for junkyards, which is a totally different use allowed only in the industrial zoning district. It is not for contractors' yards, which is a totally different
But
use.
why can't we use it for the junkyard?
You can put similar restrictions on a contractor's yard as may be applied to
All right,
a junkyard, but
okay.
there is no state requirement for contractor's yards.
Well, I agree. I'm not arguing that point, but we can use this and bring it over into our interpretation for the contractor's yard.
Yes, you can.
And I think that's what most of the people in this area are wanting. They're not totally kicking against a contractor's yard, but they don't want to see it with the visible eye, the regular eye. Now, I don't say they can take a pair of binoculars and see it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying from the naked eye. And you should not be able to see it from a primary high road, a secondary highway with the naked eye. That needs to do a whole lot more screening on these yards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tommy.
Mr.
I believe Mr. Light has his hand raised.
He
I'm
does.
sorry.
That's okay. Yes, Mr. Light.
Yes, hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so appreciate this. I share the sentiment that there certainly are some details that aren't fully fleshed out, but I am not so sure that this isn't a positive step forward that should be taken. With respect to the 50 cars, or do we want to encourage 50 cars concern, I think that's a misreading of the language. It says, up to, for the conditions of level 1, and as Mr. Curry pointed out in the beginning, this would be something that's discussed as a as a special exception. So I think the entire concept of this change is that given the uncertainty around the activities, that it would be incumbent on the applicant to bring those details and those particulars about their use to the process of seeking a special exception. And if the proposed site is on a road where 50 cars would be inappropriate, I would assume that the bodies would set a lower number for that given site. My fear is, because of all the uncertainties around this, if we don't do anything until we think about every scenario and every possibility, we'll never do anything. And to me, this set of conditions, along with the definitions, let me comment on that for a moment. Mr. Curry, maybe you could address this straight on, but I too struggled at first with the lack of definitions for, say, level 1 and level 2, but it's pretty clear upon reading it that it's sort of self-defining. If you want to get approval for one of these yards, you can see how well you qualify for approval under level 1 based on where you are and what you're doing and the lot size and the intended use, and that will become apparent if you fit within that space or that acceptable that use. And if you don't, because you have larger buildings or some of the other conditions, you're going to have to meet the additional standards of level 2. So I've kind of worked through in my mind that some of those definitional concerns are unwarranted. Yes, perhaps there's ways to make them clearer and a bit more explicit, but I don't see those as failings of the proposed language. So yes, I kind of concur that this is moving rather quickly, but I wanted to react to a couple of those particular concerns and say that I think they're unwarranted. That's all.
Yeah, and I can just speak real quickly. Art pulled this together initially, and then we coordinated to refine it. And then, of course, it went to the board, which was posted publicly on I think the May 6th board meeting. It was before the Planning Commission on their May 15th meeting, and so then it was published and available to review at my office. So it's been available for a long time. There have been minor tweaks along the way. There is one use. It is contractor's office shop yard. There are different special requirements depending on the intensity of that use that you desire. And so if you desire a small contractor's office shop yard, there are certain special requirements that you must follow. If you want something bigger than a small one, then there are much more onerous special requirements that you must meet, including developing mitigation plans, because your use is going to be much more impactful to the community. And so you know your business, applicant, and the applicant must then share with the public and the board and the planning commission how their application and their use is going to be developed in a way that doesn't impact the community. And they're going to explain that to the community through their plans and their analysis. And if they're on Battle Mountain Road, they're going to have to explain why 50 vehicles, equipment, whatever combination, might be appropriate, because they have 5 trucks and 45 pieces of equipment that are only ever used 5 at a time. And that's going to have to be explained to the community as you go through the special exception process. If they said, I've got 50 dump trucks and all I do is dump truck work, that might not be appropriate for certain secondary roads. But that's going to come out during that public process.
Alvin Henry, Planning Commission, Hampton District. I think You know, this problem we have goes back to when a zoning map was overlaid onto Rappahannock County, and the godfathers at that time kind of decided what was going to be in place and where it was going to be in place, and they decided that commercial and industrial zoning was a negative thing and that it should be limited and very controlled. And we ended up with very little industrial zoning in the county, and I believe that the only two spots we had it on was with the old Eileen factory, and I believe the Eileen factory was already there, and in Sperryville on the Pete Estes property up there above Estes Mill, and I believe that was the only two industrial locations that we had. And you know, needless to say, the Sperryville one is next to a river, hard to get to, so that wasn't very usable. And what has happened is that this has forced people that have needs for contractors' yards to go into the countryside and to use property where they live or joining them or whatever else to accommodate their business and uses. So, and this, when I read this, I think about 20,000 square feet, and you know, that's not even a half an acre, and you know, that's a very little amount of space, and I know a lot of people have gardens that are at least that size, and so when you think about a contractor's yard, and if you are one of these people that have a large number of equipment and have supplies, that definitely is not going to do it. So that already puts you in a situation where either you go out of business or you violate the law because you can't get a permit to operate. And there's hybrid properties in the county that are they junkyards or they contractor yards? Are they both? I mean, I've seen people in the county that have old containers, old school buses that they store straw in, or you know, oil or whatever to use in their trucks and everything. So that takes up space, and I guess that would count as a vehicle or a piece of equipment or whatever. So and they may have, like the gentleman said before, vehicles that they use for scrap, where they take parts off of. I had to replace a part on a sickle bar mower this weekend, and it was $500. And so I went and found an old mower someplace and took a part off of that. So this equipment that lays around that they need for parts, it has real value to them. We may not see the value in it, but they do see value. And our perception of what is good and bad may be different. If you drive by a farmer's location and he has silage wagons, tractors, old trucks and everything, that's okay. But if you drive by somebody that has some yellow caterpillars in there and some other stuff, and that's not okay. So it's metal, it's used and working, but they're going to be perceived differently. You can say, well, that's an agricultural use. Well, the other one's a construction use. So, you know, why aren't the two treated equal? And I think maybe we need to look closer at this relationship between contractor yards and junkyards, and maybe try to determine some more relevance and relationships between the two. They're definitely related, and I don't know whether they're related enough to where we need to look at the whole package at one time to see how we need to weigh each one of them. And I guess what we're talking about too is that really, unless you've come in with a permit, there's really no property that is grandfathered with their present use. So anybody that is using their property now would have to comply. I guess, is this going to be complaint driven?
If they have a contract, if they have a special exception already, or if their use predates when the contractor's yard special use was developed, which is probably 1986.
19 what?
86.
86. So if they came after 86, they would have an issue. But they would have a right to whatever they have now was pre-86. Yeah.
Very likely, unless
Okay.
somehow there was a use established earlier.
And then I guess too, we address view sheds and highways and things like this, but we haven't talked anything about environmental sensitive areas on these properties, within streams and things like this, where you got potential for pollutants. So it seems like that word was never used in any of this wordage. So I think we got some more consideration here.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Thomas says, Planning Commission, Piedmont District. A lot of the things I agree with. I mean, I'm one of the last ones that want to say, hey, let's add this to our agenda so we can go back over it. But I think it should be delayed and looked at a little bit. A couple things, like Mr. Henry pointed out, the water issue. We always talk about type 1, type 2 roads, those types of things, and Airbnbs. And the other issue I think we really haven't addressed, I think Ms. Hunt did a little bit, was the whole dark skies, the light issue, which is a whole another thing that I don't remember really going through. So I think we should probably, as painful as it is, I say, put the brakes on a little bit and give a little more time.
Thank you.
Tommy. Brian, did you want to add anything?
I'm not going to waste time.
Okay. I would just say that I pretty much feel the same way, and in trying to do a joint public hearing for something like this, you know, there's language that's put forward. It's one of those kind of man proposes, God disposes sort of issues too, because we did have a very robust planning commission meeting last month. So I think we had 24 people participate in public comment or some number like that. So we did have a lot of work at the Planning Commission, and but even at that, the wheels were already in motion for this language, for this meeting. I do think we can do better. I do think we have time to do better. And I would agree with my fellow commissioners to that end.
All right, anything board-wise?
Well, no, I just think that everybody had some incredibly insightful things to say. I think that looking at situating these possibly on highways is probably doable with the right kind of screening and more definition. I think that Ms. Ritter had a really good point about conservation areas. I think that that's a salient thing to look into for many different reasons, and I do agree that lighting is a big issue that we should definitely explore for two reasons. The first is that contractors need lights at night. So we need to think about that. And we need to think about how we can facilitate that while at the same time protecting our dark skies. The second thing, and I think Mr. Henry brought this up, is that, and I think I mentioned this at our meeting too, I'm not totally sold on the square footage. I think we just need to just be careful. There probably is something that's really desirable in our county in terms of a business and a contractor's yard, and I would hate to limit that. I'm thinking of big contractors that would want to do something that would fit and it would be appropriate. You know, we do want to be business friendly, and we want to do it in the right way. So I think Mr. Henry said it was that was not even an acre. I think an acre is like 43,000 square feet or something like that. And so the point is that if you do have a lot of equipment and you want to keep some of that equipment covered, you can probably hit 30,000 square feet of coverage pretty quickly, depending on the size of your operation. But I think this is a step in the right direction. I also do think that the thing in level 2 right there that Mr. Curry just brought up, line 123, level 2 applications must include a light, noise, dust, vermin, fume, smoke. You know, that, I mean, I think that could be looked at for level 1 as well in terms of maybe not the fire suppression. I don't know, but again, I do think that there is usefulness in this, in that we do want the appropriate businesses to fit and to do well. So that would be my thoughts. Just sounds like more discussion probably is needed.
Yeah, I do want to make sure we're clear that the level 2 may exceed 20,000 square feet of storage, outside storage. So you could have any amount of outside storage, but it does limit it to structures. So if you have a barn that has all your equipment in it, it would be limited to half an acre in area.
Well, so for instance, on ag land, you can put 100,000 square feet of covered structure
Sure.
in the right way.
Yeah.
You have that many pigs, you can scatter it over hundreds of acres, not a problem, you can do it by right.
That is correct.
So, the point is that if we're gonna do this, we should do it such that like somebody has a bunch of equipment. Not that you plow a whole lot more in Virginia anymore, but imagine someone has a lot of trucks they're trying to cover, you could hit 30,000 square feet of coverage really fast.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah, so the community would have to decide whether you want 30,000 square foot industrial type buildings throughout your countryside. And if that's appropriate trade-off for the commercial investment and it is compatible with those by right uses, agriculture, then yeah, you absolutely do.
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be an industrial building. This is what I'm talking about. Is that you could have 7 of those buildings scattered about, and it would hit 30,000 feet very quickly, and they could all be a standing seam roof, really nice post and beam structures. So that doesn't look like an industrial building, and yet we've limited them to do that. So
Yeah, so it's a scale, and this does limit. And so if the board wanted to limit to a different number, or today, there are no limits on anything. And everything's left to
Yeah, I know, I agree.
conditions. And so if this limit is not deemed as appropriate, then I certainly wouldn't adopt that. You would not adopt that limit, and you would leave it to the conditions of the special exceptions as might be appropriate for a site-by-site analysis.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I worry a little bit about unintended consequences here. For instance, by now everyone knows my dad was a farmer. But during the winter months, my dad did other things when he wasn't farming. So, I'm thinking about the vehicles. He did have a school bus on our farm. He did have a couple of things. You could not see it from the roadway. He was on 50 acres and he had it neat and tidy, and you had to be deep back there before you could see it. So I just shared that to say I worry about unintended consequences. We've heard a lot here tonight about the desire to slow down and take a better look at this.
Mr. Whitson?
I appreciate all the I appreciate all the comments, and I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Thank you. I do believe that delaying a bit to get the definition straight, some clarity on line 123. I think Karen brought it up that there may be the words themselves may not be clear to everyone. And I think that was what we've heard in the past is, what does dark skies mean? Luckily, there's definition of that available, but there may be other things that we really need to, scenic views and stuff like that really may need a better definition. My father's business was bridge building, and he had what he called the yard right along Route 1 in Caroline County. And I don't think it took up, it may have taken up an acre, but I don't think it was that big. And he did have old cranes on it that he would use parts from and stuff like that. So what Mr. Henry said about equipment does make sense. I understand that. But I think looking at the conservation use that Ms. Ritter brought up, I definitely agree that we need to look at that as well. So it seems to me like we're on the same trajectory. We just need to maybe get the right people in a room. I don't know who those right people are, but get them in a room to have the final kind of clean this up conversation and then come back.
How would the planning commission feel?
do we have a pretty big application coming this month, Michelle?
2, right?
What's our agenda look like?
3, maybe 3. agree.
Are they, I hate to say, are they more ambitious applications or like just, okay. I suspect it may be something that we have to handle in a work session.
Okay, I'm game for that.
So are you saying planning commission have a work session, or you want a joint work session?
I don't see why we don't do it joint again.
I would only say that I think trying to work jointly is a little bit cumbersome, but I'll defer to how everybody else feels.
I mean, I think that, I mean, if you wanted to do it just the planning commission, I mean, you guys are incredibly productive, and I think what you're saying might be true, that it could be more agile.
I think it typically works pretty well.
If you've got room to do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we are the unintended consequence of the, I don't want to say for sure, but I think the Airbnb 2-year taking effect in July, I think is compelling some people to make application now,
Sure.
perhaps. So, so we may have quite a bit of that going on.
Do you have an expectation as to when you think you can add it to your agenda?
I mean, we'll have to meet and schedule a work session or figure out a way to schedule a work session, but I think we can have it back to you in 30 to 60 days.
Sounds good.
All right. Appreciate all the
So
input.
do that by consensus?
Does anybody feel differently about it?
You're not. I guess
You
the
don't need
board
to
doesn't
vote?
want to have any action to refer. You just want consensus that the planning commission's going to work on.
And if the planning commissioners would prefer to meet jointly, I would like to hear that too, but,
I think we get it work done more efficiently if we do it ourselves and then pass it on.
I think the meeting tonight has been instructive in that it gives us a feel for what the board is looking for. And I think that will help us to conclude the exercise.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot of good information.
And also from the general public, which has been great. And it's unfortunate that sometimes things don't generate feedback until they gain more air in the public eye.
Yes.
As we find out.
Yes.
All right, so you'll keep us informed because we will report on the planning commission every month?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, the next, oh, you want to adjourn your,
At this point, I would adjourn the planning commission. Do we need a motion to do that?
What do you normally do?
We normally take a motion. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? I think that's Mr. Sisk, and I heard a second from Ms. Ritter.
yes.
Any further discussion or all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you,
for
everyone.
being
Have
here.
a nice evening from the planning commission.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr.
If
Light.
you'd like to stay, you're welcome to stay.
Be like Groundhog Day.
Had a lot of joint meetings today.
All right, the next public hearing is SE 24-03-01 Carton Tourist Home.
Ms. Summers will provide an introduction.
Thank you, Gary.
This is special exception 240301. The applicant wishes to use the existing home as a 3-bedroom tourist home pursuant to 170-36E and 170-66K. Mrs. Carton wishes to use the existing home as a 3-bedroom tourist home, which is located at 437 Rolling Road. It's 10.11 acres in size and it's zoned agricultural. At the planning commission meeting, they did request for staff to confirm the ownership, which has been done, and in your packet under the application, it's the new deed is provided at page 10. The health department commented the records indicated that the property has a permit to operate a sewage disposal system having a capacity of 450 gallons per day, 3 bedrooms and 6 occupants. The well records indicate that the well had an 80-gallon per minute yield. The septic tank was pumped out in 2020 and is on schedule to be pumped out again in 2025. VDOT did not have any objections to the request. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 17th in which they recommended approval of the application with the following conditions by a vote of 7-0. Staff conditions, a maximum of 3 bedrooms, 6 guests. No food service be offered to renters of the facility. The permit terminates upon sale or transfer of the property. The property may not be subleased, rented by third party, or used as a timeshare, and a limit of 6 vehicles. And this was noticed and advertised for 2 consecutive weeks as required. And the applicant is present if anybody has any questions.
And well, I'm not going to put you through reading it. I do want to point out that the county code allows special exceptions for uses that are not normally allowed in a particular zoning district because conditions are placed on them to make them compatible. That's in 17047C, and then 17047G clearly identifies as the applicant's responsibility and burden to satisfy the requirements of the code and to share with you why their use is appropriate for this parcel.
Is the applicant here? Oh, hello. Would the board like to hear from the applicant first?
I mean, we did have a nice little introduction at the planning commission.
That's a good idea.
If you'd like to speak.
Would you like to come up? Yes, please.
Hi, everyone. Alyssa Carton, Piedmont District. I've been here a couple times now and met many of you. Had great referrals from some local residents in terms of, I know one of the questions was having a local person in case of emergencies, and we did meet Fred Jenkins, and he's agreed to be our local person, local eyes. And we've got local maid service, Rocket Maids, and Fred's wife as a backup, Amber. So we're just enjoying our time here. I got to attend my first Berry Fest, which was really nice. I was blown away by how many people came with not the greatest weather. So happy to answer any questions. We're excited. We love it here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, I will open the public hearing for this tourist home only. Anyone wishing to speak, please be recognized and come up and give us your name and your district. Alrighty. Not seeing anybody in the courtroom, I'll move to Zoom. Anyone on Zoom wishing to speak during this public hearing? Oh, that was an easy public hearing. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing and open it up to the board. Ms. Smith?
Yes, this is in the, this property's in the Piedmont District, and I don't know if any of you took an opportunity to drive back down Rolling Road to see this house, but it is a beautiful property and a beautiful location. It's very private. It is relatively easy access. The road standards don't apply. It just seems like a good fit. I would only just say if you get tired of coming to visit, please rent it out to a local family because we need more housing if that should ever arise. But it is very suitable for this use. And it is nice to know that people are coming and spending money on our local economy too when they do have these sort of part-time homes in the county. So it's a good combination, and I thought the applicant was very forthcoming, a good clean application, and we're able to make minimal requests for follow-up as a result.
You have a motion?
I will go ahead and make a motion that we approve the application for a 3-bedroom tourist home submitted by Alyssa Carton with the stipulations as outlined from the staff report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just to clarify that special exception 240301.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Gary.
All those in favor say aye.
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 No opposed. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Next is public hearing SE number 24-03-02, Ragged Ridge.
Thank you. The applicants wish to use this existing home as a 3-bedroom tourist home pursuant to 170-36E and 170-66K. The property is located at 9 Piola Mills Road with all 3 combined parcels for a total of 68.589 acres. The property is zoned agricultural. The health department commented that the records indicated that the property's septic system was updated in 2008. The home listed as 3-bedroom, 6-person occupancy with a 450 gallon per day estimated rate. A well construction permit was received on March 19th of this year. It's currently under review. The health department would recommend the use of this property as a tourist home contingent upon the installation of the new well, and if the well has a potable, adequate daily flow to support the occupancy. VDOT commented that they had no objections to this request. It met standard entrance and stopping site distance. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this application also on April the 17th, in which they recommended approval with the following conditions of a vote of 7-0. Staff recommended conditions and subject to the applicant obtaining potable water sample and approval by the health department prior to the occupancy of the property. That the entity that consists of the 2 sisters are the 2 members of Ragged Ridge LLC, and in the event if one becomes incapacitated or deceased or no longer a partner for whatever reason, the other member can continue to own the property in the LLC or outside of the LLC. However, if the property is sold, the permit terminates. Upon sale, transfer of the property would have to leave in excess of 10 acres or more for the permit to remain invalid. Again, this was advertised for 2 consecutive weeks per state code, and the applicants are present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Would one of you want to come up and speak to the board?
Hello, I'm Trevor Thraves, speaking on behalf of Ragged Ridge. As mentioned, it's a family-operated LLC. We purchased the property as a family, 2 sisters, brother-in-law, Andy, who is born and raised in Rappahannock, has a farm within about 6 miles from there, with the idea of eventually being all closer together. And in the meantime, the idea was to develop, to kind of refurbish and bring back to life the property as a whole. It's been vacant. The home on the property was vacant for 15 years. It was built in the 1920s. And so we were going through the efforts of rehabbing it, preserving as much of it as possible, and generally trying to maintain its unique character while also bringing it into the current century. Well on that way there. We do have the well permit. It was issued actually on the 9th of April. It is scheduled to be done this week. It's been scheduled to be done earlier, but it's scheduled now to be done this week. And generally here for any questions. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I'll open the public hearing for this tourist home. Anyone wishing to speak, please be recognized and give us your name and your district.
Karen Hunt, Jackson District. I don't have any prepared remarks, but just thinking over the issue with the water and a new well. And, you know, sometimes they start out a little funky and water samples may be fine, but I wonder if there is something else that maybe should be done as a condition to do a check, you know, at a little bit farther down the road, just to make sure that everything is functioning as intended. Sometimes it takes a while for a well to settle down or to display other issues. So just a thought. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Tommy Jackson, Jackson District. I have a concern that relates to all of the tourist homes. When we're dealing with Airbnbs, we have a very difficult issue. Currently in this county, right now, I just a week or two ago spoke with Ms. Nick, our treasurer. They cannot get the required information that they need from the Airbnbs to be able to determine if we are getting the right amount of taxes, lodging tax that we're supposed to be. She had just wrote to one Airbnb. The response back was, "You'll have to subpoena me to get that." And we know we can't fight. We can't do that way. So what I'm recommending, we need to put some teeth into this lodging tax. I think the applicant needs to go to the Commissioner of Revenue and the Treasurer and get the required information that they need, and then they need to pass it on. If they are going to run it through an Airbnb, they need to run it. They need to provide the information to the Airbnb and telling them that this county, they must provide that information. Now, if the applicant's not able to get that, then I think we need to have the right to pull their permit. So I think we need to put some teeth into this. We've talked about it, but we've never done anything about it. So, but it is an issue. If any of you care, speak with Ms. Nick. They're having a difficult time.
Thank you for that. I don't see anyone else in the courtroom. Anyone online wishing to speak during this public hearing? All right, I don't see any hands there. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and open it up to the board.
Well, this is also in Piedmont District, so I guess I'll go next again. I'll just say this was a very interesting night at the Planning Commission. We heard these same three applications, and it was a study in opposites because we'd had the Airbnb application in Chester Gap the month before, where literally everyone on the street came out and spoke against the application, and then we had these applications, which we had no public input on. And I will just say, as someone who drives down the road, who's the representative for the district where this property is located, it is a wonderful thing to me when I see life being breathed into old buildings. And you all are putting a lot of work into that building in a way that I don't know a lot of people would have done. And it's always nice to see old buildings come back to life. It's always nice to know that land will stay in agriculture. And if an Airbnb helps those two things happen, I think we should approve it. And I hear what you're saying, Mr. Atkins, and I don't disagree that the system is imperfect in terms of reporting and collection, but that's not this applicant's issue. This applicant is a very forthright, law-abiding individual, and I know that they have and will do whatever we ask of them in the course of this application. And it was a condition of the Planning Commission that we have a potable water sample without having the well installed. I think that is a reasonable condition to keep in effect. We certainly don't want to hold this application up. We want them to be able to move forward and do the things that they need to do. So I would hope my peers would agree that we can approve this application with that as a condition for the approval.
Is that a motion?
I guess if everyone's nodding their head, I'll go ahead and make that my motion.
I'll second.
Your motion is to approve special exception 240302 with the Planning Commission recommended conditions, which included the staff recommended conditions and added to that the potable water testing and the information about ownership and survivorship, etc.
That's correct. I think that's a reasonable motion, and I really appreciate the applicant being so forthcoming And I know it's a difficult market to get any kind of work done, but I know well work can be especially challenging. So I hope they get that done for you sooner than later.
I drove by the sign on the way to the Shenandoah event yesterday, and I'm like, wow, that's going to be a great location. So, all right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. Moving along. Now we have public hearing SC number 24-03-03 Delmar Tourist Home.
Thank you. The applicant wishes to use the existing home as a 4-bedroom tourist home pursuant to 17036E and 17066K. The property is located at 16 Little Way, is on 22.234 acres, and the property is zoned agricultural. The health department commented that septic records indicate that the property has a permit to operate a sewage disposal system having a capacity of 600 gallons per day, 4 bedrooms, 8-person occupancy. The septic was recently pumped in March of 2024. The well has a 7-gallon per minute yield. VDOT did not have any objections to the request. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this on April the 17th. They recommended approval with a vote of 7-0 with staff conditions, a maximum of 4 bedrooms, 8 guests, no food service to be offered to the renters of the facility. The permit terminates upon sale or transfer of the property outside of the family, and that the property may not be subleased, rented by a third party, or used as a timeshare. Again, this was advertised for 2 consecutive weeks, and the applicant is present to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Delmar?
Yes. Thank you. Good evening. We like to call this a wine club member home, not a tourist home. We really, the point there is that this home is kind of part of our Rappahannock Cellars operation, which is why it's not being rented out as a normal rental. It's too integral to what we do. We farm right up around the house. We park up around the house. And we used to have our winemaker who lived there. Now we don't have a winemaker who needs a home on site anymore. So we're trying to repurpose it. So I think the only thing, just to clarify, we had asked if we could have the ability to transfer this home within our companies. And right now we're trying to decide which one of those it should be. We've got 2 operating companies on site, and we've got 2 real estate operating companies on site. So we haven't figured out which entity yet, and or maybe my children, who the home would be transferred to, but we see doing that in the next 6 to 12 months. So we didn't want to have to come back for any one of those transfers to have that permit expire and go back through the whole process again. So that was the one condition that we were asking for beyond what the staff recommended. And here to answer any questions.
The entities, the LLCs are, I know you have a large family. Are your children a part of those as well?
Most of them, yes. Yeah. Okay. We've got our winery operating company has a couple of my kids in it. Some of them aren't. Our vineyard land ownership has them all in. Our Ditta's distillery company has them all in, so it's kind of a mixed bag, but yeah.
Okay. So just to be clear, the Planning Commission recommended conditions as that the permit terminates upon sale or transfer of the property outside of the family. Do you think that meets your need or is inadequate?
Well, as long as outside the family would allow for one of our entities that the family owns, that's okay. If it needs to go into the name of my family members, that might be cumbersome.
Okay, I'm sure the board can discuss that as they decide what conditions are appropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I'll open this public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak with regards to this particular tourist home, please come up and give us your name and your district.
My name is Karen Hunt, Jackson District. Again, don't have any prepared notes, just listening here. I understand the personal desire to be able to transfer within entities, but that is a precedent that we have pretty much required Airbnb applicants to stick to a permit terminates upon sale or transfer. I know that may be inconvenient for this applicant, and I'm sorry about that, but if it is their intent somewhere to transfer, then the proper process would be to come back and ask for, an amended application or go, in some way. But I think it would not be wise to set a different precedent than what we typically do. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, not seeing anyone else in the courtroom. Anyone on Zoom wishing to speak to this tourist home? No hands raised. I'll go ahead and close this public hearing and open it up to the board. This tourist home applicant is in my district. I do understand the concern of transferring if it's not within the family. If I don't know, and Ms. Smith, you probably know better than I, or I know you do, this one's slightly different in my mind because it really is a part, even though it's not legally a part of Rappahannock Cellars, it is a part of their property and their business. And so it is different to me in that sense, because you're surrounded by Rappahannock Cellars wine.
I would just say that we discussed this at the Planning Commission, and we felt that keeping with the norm of transfer only within the family members and not within business entities was appropriate.
Did you discuss business entities that had family members in them?
I don't know that we parsed it out that intently, and how you would differentiate that in the future if that could be problematic.
That's why being a business, I see it as different. I do have to give you great credit in our county for the growth of your business and the success of your business. And it's always nice to see so many of your children in the business working. I don't have issue with the LLC that has one of your children being a part of it. To me, it seems that they're still a part of the entity. But I do understand the concern, so I'd love to hear from the rest of the board.
Oh man, well, I certainly understand the sentiment here. I think it is tricky, shifting it to an LLC. I don't know why we wouldn't do that for other people. I get it. I understand that it's kind of surrounded by the rest of the property. So I'm assuming it looks like it's hard for me to really tell, but if I just take it logically, it's not like you transfer it to an LLC and then sell it. And
yeah, this is the property right now. One thing I didn't mention.
Could you come back up to the mic, please?
Sorry.
Thanks.
One thing I didn't mention is that the way this property operates right now, it's under lease to Rappahannock Cellars. So it's really part of our business entity there, and that's where we most likely will end up with that ownership being transferred into. We just haven't gone through all the machinations of our estate planning. I look much younger than I am, but it is that time in my life for look at these things, and we see that happening in 6 to 12 months. And this process, as you all know, it's a lengthy process. I think we started this a year ago. The idea that if I transfer this into one of my companies or one of my entities and I have to spend another year back at it and be back in front of you in 6 to 12 months, that's what we were trying to avoid. I'm not 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years from now, we're selling the property. That's a different kind of, but to one of our existing entities that's involved in the operation of this business, and it is, as you all can see if you've been out there, it's part of Rappahannock Cellars, and it's just kind of a quirk the way the ownership ended up separate on it. So that was our thinking there.
Understood. So This last tourist application we granted to an LLC.
With a convoluted
Yes.
ownership.
So is there any way in this one to sort of go forward with it? You know what I mean? Like, look, so if John had come in here in 6 months, he'd have it under the LLC and we'd be giving it to that entity.
Right.
Is there any way to do that here today to encapsulate that so that it's not just, hey, you can transfer to
I
whomever
think you could formulate a condition that states that the special exception would convey to an LLC that includes a membership, including family members, or Del Mar family members, something like that.
Yeah, I might also add, we're talking about LLCs. My Rappahannock Vineyards LLC is what currently owns the land that's under the winery. The winery is actually a subchapter S corporation, and so we've got the sub S and we've got the LLC. So I don't know if that makes a difference in how you all think about it. Those are tax considerations when you start these entities, but we do have both of those here.
I think to me, it really doesn't matter what kind of entity owns it now.
Entity.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. It's more about like the transfer. Like, we're just, I don't know, the way that I at least think about this is a lot of these permits terminate upon sale or transfer. And we've put those in there to protect the housing stock in Rappahannock, I think. I mean, that's just the kind of general. So I am comfortable with the family language. I would also be, if we can craft it, be comfortable with doing an LLC, but I would want it to be here. It would not be, okay, well, Mr. Delmar here in 6 months can transfer it to an LLC that none of us know about, and now he can do that, and it's just out of our...
So
it kind of goes somewhere.
Upon sale or transfer of the property outside of the family or to a corporate entity including family members, at least one family member, at least X number of family members?
We could, if it helps, we could name, I don't know which one of these four entities it's going to end up being, but it'll be one of the four. If we could name those four, we're not going to go start a new one for
Or
this.
transfer the property outside of the family or
to one of the four.
The four corporate entities,
Right.
which are?
So Cana Cellars, Inc. is our DBA Rappahannock Cellars. Rappahannock Vineyards LLC is the landowner under Rappahannock. Glenway Farms, Inc. is our distillery part of the operation on site. And Del Mar Family LLC is actually the major owner of Rappahannock Cellars, or I'm sorry, Rappahannock Vineyards LLC. So that's two layers in there. So it'd be one of those four entities, and they all have slightly different ownerships with the way my children and my wife and I have put it together.
Right, so if you were further along in your estate planning 6 months from now, you would be coming in here with it done and asking for that ownership.
Sure, either done or this is the entity it's going to be. Can you approve it with that? Yeah.
And then I think that it puts it constrains a potential transfer, and I think doing that transfer of the property outside of the family or to one of the four named corporate entities provides a clear box that is allowed, if that's what the board wants to do.
I would
Along
like
with
to
the
make
other
that motion. What he just said.
So what I said was you want to move approval of SC 240303 with the Planning Commission recommended conditions, except condition C would be modified to read, this permit terminates upon sale or transfer of the property outside of the family or to the
Four.
I don't recall what the four corporate entities named during the public hearing by Mr. Delmar, which will be enumerated in the minutes.
Yes.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
I would just make sure that the applicant is okay with that. That was pretty good on your feet work there, colleagues, but just make sure that he's okay with it.
Yes.
He is. Thank you for that.
I just wonder, is it important to link the operating entity of the rental to the operating entity of Rappahannock Cellars? Will it be the same? I mean, presumably so.
I'm not sure I understand the question. The
So-
operating entity of the home. Right now, the land is leased to Rappahannock Cellars, who operates the whole property. And, we kind of see this as basic, we don't see this out on VRBO or Airbnb. We see it as marketed to our customers and our wine club members and that kind of thing.
And maybe we can say it's a one-time transfer.
Would that work?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I want this to have an expiration date.
Doesn't really have
Had
a
motion and
date. It's
second.
got-
So,
so we
is that a
need to.
friendly amendment?
Friendly amendment.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So
it's a-
just to be clear, I thought that language had assumed that it was transferring only to one of those four.
Correct.
But to her point.
It could bounce around.
Yeah, but to her point, it can only do that once.
One time.
Yeah, and you understand that friendly amendment, and you do too.
And I do
You
too.
both accept it,
I
and that is
appreciate
now
that.
the motion.
The applicant.
One and done's good for me.
I appreciate that. This is uncharted territory, so the narrower we can keep this scope, I think,
Better.
the better.
Yep.
And I appreciate your willingness to refine the process.
All right, we have a motion that was amended and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
You don't want to do the next one, Sean? Your last public hearing of the evening is an ordinance amendment for County Code Chapter 98, your erosion sediment control ordinance. I give a rather lengthy explanation of this at your last meeting. Code of Virginia, short story Code of Virginia, and the state regulations are changing effective July 1, and this code ordinance amendment modifies your code to stay in line with the new regulations, which are completely recodified and completely upgraded, combining erosion sediment control and stormwater management together, which has been in the works for a very long time. The proposed ordinance, like our current ordinance, is based on the model ordinance provided by the state with some minor tweaks here and there as is needed to make the model ordinance work with us. Unlike the earlier public hearings, which were advertised to the public in accordance with code section relevant to zoning, this was advertised pursuant to 15.2.14.27 because it has nothing to do with zoning, and so it has slightly different requirements. But it has been advertised 2 weeks in a row in accordance with that code section. We reviewed the ordinance in a fair amount of detail last time, and now it's time to receive input from the public.
All right. Anyone wishing to speak with regards to erosion and sediment control? Please come up and be recognized and give us your district.
Mary Catherine Ishii, Piedmont.
Do you want to squeeze it? Put it down there. This thing. Let's see if I can figure it out.
Just squeeze the bottom of that
Squeeze the
thing.
bottom.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, thank you. It's an IQ test, so I fail it every time. Mary Catherine Ishii, Piedmont. Thank you, Debbie. So I understand the circumstances, as Mr. Curry has explained it, that the state has amended the existing stormwater and erosion control statutes, and the regulations implementing these changes become effective July 1. And localities have been provided this model language, and the staff is recommending that we implement that model language essentially in full. Obviously, making our ordinance compliant with the state code is a goal we all agree on fully, and utilizing provided model language is also a very reasonable approach. That's no problem with that. However, there do appear to be some instances where the model language is less protective than our current ordinance, and retaining these higher protections is desirable if at all possible. I apologize because some of us did not catch it on the last meeting and so did not quite look at this as quickly as we'd have liked, but the quick turnaround on this proposed language has not enabled, for me at least, sufficient time to accurately identify the hopefully few areas where the changes to the model language might be warranted. But I have done a quick review, which suggests that at least some of these desirable changes might include the following, if I've gotten this right. Keeping our current requirement that a public hearing be held prior to revising these regulations, if they are more stringent than the state program, or making other changes not specifically required by state law. I don't see us carrying forward a public hearing requirement here.
And that's inherent with 15.2, 14.27, so it's redundant.
So
there must be a public hearing if we change it at all.
Maybe I misunderstood that, and if this is okay to talk like this, that'd be helpful. No. I understood that public hearing, that the governing body can change an ordinance at any time. The only time a public hearing is required, it would be under the zoning stuff. I didn't know that the public hearing is always required for every ordinance change. Okay, that would be worth knowing. Thank you for correcting that. There's also, if I read it right again, that in the current draft that you have, that a performance bond may be required, but in the current ordinance, a performance bond is required for all parties, for example. Those were just a few of the examples. It's possible, again, as you said, that these and other changes are required by the new state law or are consistent with it. But I will say that erosion and sediment control in steep mountainous Rappahannock County is an important issue for residential development, but also for any potential larger scale commercial or industrial proposals such as solar farms, which is where this came up in my mind in other contexts, is that erosion control is certainly a huge issue in the solar farm situation. State requirements do appear to govern these issues in most instances, but if we can manage to keep stronger requirements already in our ordinance, we should. Of course, a large part of the issue here is timing. We are apparently, as Gary has said, required to have these new regulations in place by July 1, and if I misconstrued that earlier today in my haste, I apologize that it does appear to be the case. The next scheduled Board of Supervisors meeting is, in fact, July 1. So it does bump us up against the deadline. However, it does also, if we pass this on July 1, allow us to look at this and tweak it where possible, rather than just somewhat arbitrarily, if we will, inserting the state model language may or may not in every instance suit our local needs. So I would ask that you postpone a vote on this matter tonight until the July 1 meeting, and simply ask that the staff consider community comments that are submitted within the next 2 weeks. Understanding the time frames needed on this. It would also be helpful, just as Gary has pointed out here, that if staff would be willing to sit down with interested citizens as the fastest and most efficient way of answering questions and working directly through any concerns. This particular issue doesn't strike me as being overly complicated or controversial, and I don't think questions should be overly difficult to resolve, and I do thank the staff and for the board for having attended to the deadlines on this important matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guess I'm a little taller than MK, just a hair. Karen Hunt, Jackson District. I've only had the opportunity to do a cursory look at the proposed erosion and sediment control ordinance amendment, and I feel like I still need time to review it in depth and do some research. Since the original meeting agenda was only available to the public last week, there's not been sufficient time to properly review the proposed language. The erosion and sediment control is an important component of our ordinance and vital to protecting our waterways, water quality, road conditions, as in a deluge of runoff issues, and private property, among other things. We have areas of the county with steep slopes where this is even more of a critical consideration. While the agenda description states that, quote, nearly the entire chapter language is proposed to be deleted and replaced, I was relieved to see that that is actually not the case. It might have been easier for those of us reviewing this if track changes had been used on the current ordinance instead of the presented format. But all that being said, even without having had sufficient time to review it in depth, I do see a couple of things, few areas where I think this draft could be improved. This could probably benefit from additional clarification in some areas. There are definitions that should be added, in particular, a clear definition of impervious surface. There are also some clerical cleanup with some repetitive language and just a couple of little missing punctuation things. Sorry. I would ask the Board of Supervisors to hold off making any final decision on this tonight so that the public can have more time to review this and be able to provide some thoughtful feedback to the board. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. All right, not seeing anyone else in the courtroom. Anyone on Zoom wishing to speak?
i.e. Julia.
Mm-hmm. All right, not seeing a hand go up. I'll close this public hearing and open it to the board.
Oh, if I could, I want to say that the document that is placed on board docs today is the same exact document that was provided publicly at the May meeting, and that agenda was advertised to the public. Did not change. The newspaper carried public hearing notices identifying that the document was available for review at my office, as is required by the Code of Virginia. So I understand that some individuals might not have been aware of the topic until the agenda for this board meeting was published, but it was in fact available to the public for quite some time. Regarding the performance bonds and may versus shall, it's my understanding that if the current ordinance says shall, that has not been done. Performance bonds have not been required on all projects. And most of the time, we have such small projects, it's not appropriate. But there may be certain circumstances when they are appropriate. And I think it is much more appropriate for our community to align with the state code, with the may, giving the flexibility of the board and staff to require performance bonds, to ensure and have funding available should a developer walk away, as opposed to mandating it in every single circumstances.
Can we talk about from a purely practical standpoint? I mean, here we are, our next meeting's July 1st. If we want to make changes, we have a very short runway to make changes. And I think, normally if we make changes, we have to have another public hearing.
Right.
And that means we have to know what we're advertising for public hearing so that we can make sure that everything aligns just so we don't have problems with things being void ab initio and, other things going off the trails as a result of not keeping things moving smoothly forward.
Which was the purpose for the May meeting,
Yeah.
introduction of this information.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think I think if we don't do this tonight, I don't see how we get it done in July. If we're gonna I don't think we have a runway to make changes. And
No, I don't think there's going to be the erosion sediment control police that come do something to you, but I don't know what changes are going to be made to deviate from the model ordinance, whether they're appropriate or not. And you're going to pay another $500 or something to advertise the public hearing and possibly make no changes, which is fine if that's what we want to do, to allow the changes to be made. That's why we're here before the public in official capacity.
I mean, there's always inertia, so you'd spend the same amount of money passing it tonight and then changing it 2 months from that.
That is correct.
There's inertia, which is, but that is, I mean, it's a completely viable thing to do. Like, this is language that the state provided, and
Well, I mean, it's been tweaked here and there because the state provides.
Yeah, no, I get that, but I'm just generally, it's probably okay-ish to get done by July 1, to Ms. Smith's point.
Mr. Goff and I suggest, and Mr. Cornell, it's more than okay-ish, but anytime any ordinance is found to be deficient in any way, a citizen can bring that to the attention of the board and say, this should not say this, and I think it should change.
Right, I was just saying that I think it seems appropriate to be able to pass it tonight with very little, if there are things that the public would like us to change, that we can easily get to.
Sure.
and spend the same amount of money, to Ms. Smith's point, if we don't and we substantively change it, and then we have to advertise again anyway. It's the same process, and it's just we haven't passed it by July 1.
Yeah, so the board might want to consider in the future, if there's a concern, this sort of thing, that just happened twice today, that ordinance amendments are considered before the board at 2 meetings before being considered for public hearing. And you can do that. You can set your own rule and say, this is what we're going to do. You've had 2 kicks at the can before we even got to a public hearing. You can do that. Maybe you don't want to constrain yourself. I don't know.
I think it's the final.
Well, it's always the final.
It's the final one that it really just rings that bell, you know? So it's like we could do 2 of them, and if it's not the final one, it'll be the final one. We're like, well, we've already done it. This is the 3rd month in a row. But, you know, again, so, I mean, I hear what some folks are saying, but I do think that if we get it done tonight, if there are some changes we want to make, we can absolutely make them.
Yeah, and the model ordinance is very similar to the last model ordinance. There are enough changes. Quite frankly, it was not worth my time to go through all of it and try to parse it out rather than say, remove, replace. If somebody else wants to go word by word and do a red line, that is absolutely okay. But it's the juice is not worth the squeeze.
Mr. Whitson, do you have anything on this one?
I think our pushing things off is gonna come back, and pretty soon we're gonna have to deal with a lot all at once. And I agree with what Van said wholeheartedly. I also agree with what Supervisor Smith said, and that is, we're talking about, I mean, we want to do things right, and if whether or not, you know, ordinance police come knocking or not, it doesn't matter. We should strive to do what's right, and there is a deadline, and I don't think it's reasonable to say, well, you know, this could be fine-tuned, and let's.
All right.
Losing?
I don't know what I did.
Turn up phone.
Hold on. I broke something.
Please hold.
I pressed a button. He's still talking.
Well, I'll just say that I agree with what the rest of my colleagues are saying. I think it is a little better than okay-ish. And I also believe time is money. So we can do this, and if we discover that there's something that needs to be tweaked, then I think we can do so in August, in September, next year. But I think for tonight, I think I'm ready.
And I just would add that I hope that people don't feel discouraged from engaging this further if there are things that they want to follow up on. But I do think if we can meet this deadline, we should.
Mr. Whitson, I think we have you back.
Yeah, probably startling.
No, I think I muted you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, let's say it was startling. I want to make my point earlier today. I would have dialed in on my Brightspeed landline, but I couldn't count on it.
Send some smoke signals, Kier.
What's that?
Smoke signals.
Okay. So, if you heard some of it, I apologize. I'll repeat. I'll be quick. I mean, we're now getting to this habit. I think public input's awesome. Grateful for it. People are focused, and people have expertise in the community that they bring to bear on our work. And we, I think, all should be grateful for our engaged community. That said, I think this is one of those that I want to play by the rules and do what's right. And it falls into the, this is good enough for the time being, and we can meet our deadline without forcing ourselves into a rush and potentially running afoul of FOIA and public notice rules and requirements to miss this point. So I think we should get it done, and if members of the public, including Ms. Hunt and Ms. Ishii, determine that there are holes that they see in what we did, well, yeah, you can come back and fix it. But we gotta get something done at some point where nothing will be done. So I think here we are up against a deadline. This is not the kind of exciting ordinance material that draws a big crowd. So for that, I'm even more grateful that people came out to talk about this. But let's just get it done, please, tonight, and then come back if we need to. We won't lose sight of that.
Thank you. It sounds like we're all in agreement. I just need a motion.
I will make a motion to adopt the ordinance amending Rappahannock County Code, Chapter 98, Erosion and Sediment Control as presented.
I'll second it.
And very well written.
Thank you for the second, Ms. Comer. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Let's roll call that, please.
Roll call, okay. Ms. Comer?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Carney?
Aye.
Mr. Whitson?
Aye.
And I also.
We have a unanimous vote
That's good.
for erosion and sediment control.
And the state laws control everything. It's really just.
We can all agree that erosion happens. That's great.
Yeah, it is important to say that the actual standards applied are not changing any, they're still the state standards.
All right, we're moving into public comment for this evening. Anyone wishing to speak, please come up, give us your name and your district.
Mary Catherine Ishii, Piedmont. So I would like to express appreciation for your earlier decision to not have another joint meeting between the Planning Commission and the board. I think the state code allows for joint meetings, and they're really appropriate under certain circumstances. For example, if you have an educational session or you have a critical issue that needs to be done right away. But one of the drawbacks of joint meetings is that they do cut back on the number of public hearings you have and the opportunities for the public to be informed that something is actually on the agenda. I know some people feel like there are members of the community who have nothing to do with their days but sit around and try to figure out what's on the agenda next. But in fact, most people do actually have lives doing other things and don't always know. So when you truncate the process by as a custom, having joint meetings between the Planning Commission and the board, it does cut back a lot on what otherwise is a statutorily set system for two bites at the apple, if you will. So I would like to just express appreciation that you chose not to do that on the earlier issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, I don't see anybody else. One more time, anyone on Zoom wishing to speak during public comment? Okay, I don't see anybody on Zoom. I'm going to close public comment. Old business.
I don't believe the board needs to take any action at this time. I don't know that you need to say anything other. I will say that the process of negotiating with the highest ranked offerer continues, and with continued expectation that more information will be available at the July meeting.
Thank you. Don't forget to go watch the games tomorrow. It matters to kids.
But state quarterfinals, you must buy your tickets online.
Oh,
yes.
So just like for the basketball last year,
I was going to ask.
I would say look at Facebook for the schools. They probably have all the information there.
Okay.
Or contact Brian Shulin. He knows.
I pay cash.
Do you do that?
I'm not sure. Oh.
Motion to adjourn.
Have a motion?
Second.
Have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out.
Thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely.